And hello, I'm back from my Chinese adventure, where it was a Chinese adventure. Saw the Terracotta Warriors in Xi'an, which was the whole reason that I wanted to go on the trip because I had not been to Xi'an and seen the Terracotta Warriors. So I'm back to recording stuff for Marketing 301, and this topic involves socially responsible marketing. And we will approach this topic with a kind of a definition or operationalizing what is meant by socially responsible marketing. And then we'll look at three topics. There are many more than three topics that we could discuss with respect to socially responsible marketing, but we'll look at ethics, some criticisms of marketing, and then we'll finish up with a look at the so-called triple bottom line approach. So the first thing that we're going to do is to define or operationalize what's meant by socially responsible marketing. And the way that I've done this through the years is not really to define or to operationalize, but to basically ask a question. And that question is, what is marketing's responsibility for the short-term and long-term well-being of society? So the way I view socially responsible marketing is basically answering the question of what is marketing's responsibility for the short-term and long-term well-being of society. And that's a deceptively simple question because there's actually a lot of nuance in that question. So for example, what do we mean by short term and what do we mean by long term? You know, is short term a day? Is short term a week? Is it a month? Is it a year? What do you mean by long term? Is long term a year? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? And the answer to those questions has really important implications for marketing and for businesses as a whole. Because if you think about, for example, if you think about pharmaceutical products, or if you think about products that are under the jurisdiction of the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, the definition of short-term versus long-term has really important implications for the idea of product development, bringing products to market, commercialization, and things that we'll discuss down the line. So, you know, for example, one of the examples that I like to talk about is artificial sweeteners, and you know, uh, Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi did not exist 30 years ago. And one of the reasons that they became popular was because of an advance or an approval of a sweetener called aspartame, which became known as NutraSweet. And one of the challenges with aspartame is that the long-term defined as basically more than 10 years, right? The long-term effects of that particular artificial sweetener weren't known at the time it was introduced to market. And they still don't really have a good handle, 30 years later, they still don't have a really good handle on the long-term impact of that particular product. And it raises an interesting issue of, well, how much do you have to know about a product from a short-term or long-term perspective before it can be introduced to the market? And we're not saying that marketers are trying to be deceitful, but in some cases you just can't know 30 years out what you know today. Um, and the asbestos is a really good example of that. Asbestos, which is basically retards fire. They didn't know when it was used heavily in building construction back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They didn't know that it was hazardous to one's health because the field just hadn't advanced, the science just hadn't advanced. So the long-term, short-term issue is one aspect of the question. And there's not a really, easy answer to that. And the second part is what I like to refer to, and when we talk about marketing's responsibility for the short-term and long-term well-being of the society, who is it that determines what the well-being of society is? Basically, who gets to play God here? Um, and if you look at, for example, and I don't want to go down this particular path, but if you look at a lot of political disputes, right, the disputes in this country between Republicans and Democrats, a lot of it comes down on, basically, our God says this, and the other party says our God says this, and so my question is, well, who gets to play God? Who makes the ultimate determination of what is in the well-being of society? And again, it's not an easily answered question. And so when you look at an issue like socially responsible marketing, and you ask the question is, what is marketing's responsibility for the short-term and long-term well-being of society? It's not easily answered. And if you want to think about something, and we'll talk about this later on in the lecture, but this whole concept of the triple bottom line approach, the idea that you just don't approach things, or you should not approach things from purely a financial perspective. You need to think of longer term consequences. Not everybody agrees with that, and I'm not saying that one side is right or one side is wrong, but it's just that that the idea, or the concept of what is socially responsible marketing, hinges on concepts that do not have easy answers. Okay, so that's a brief overview of socially responsible marketing. And as I said before, we're going to look a little more detail at three particular issues associated with socially responsible marketing: ethics, criticisms of marketing, and the triple bottom line approach. So again, I have my handy dandy cheat sheet here. So if you see me glancing down, I'm glancing down to kind of keep me on track, and not wander way off track. So when we talk about ethics, we talk about codes of conduct, and individuals have codes of conduct, and organizations have codes of conduct. And the thing with ethics that's important to bring out is that we're not talking about law here. There are legal things. There are things that you can and cannot do, but there's a whole lot of things that aren't illegal or unlawful. And organizations and people have decisions to make associated with that. And so, for example, I mean, if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, there's no law that says that you can't date somebody else. Some people will do that, but some people will say, you know what? If I'm dating somebody and I've been seeing somebody for a while, I'm not going to date anybody else, right? So there's kind of like, the code of conduct. One person's saying, I don't care about that. If it's not unlawful, it's okay, right? Others are saying, it's not unlawful, but I don't feel comfortable doing it. And we have similar things in marketing. Okay, a lot of issues that have ethical aspects associated with marketing, and one is marketing research. And There's a lot of potential ethical issues associated in marketing research. There's if you ask somebody a question on a survey, for example, you may not be asking an unlawful or an illegal question, but certainly the way that the question is asked can be what is known as leading. So, for example, if somebody were to say to you, right, is London your favorite city? There's nothing necessarily wrong with that question, but the wording of that question doesn't necessarily give the respondent a lot of options, right? Is London your favorite city? Or maybe you say, why isn't London your favorite city? As opposed to asking a question, what is your favorite city? So I mean, there's a nuance there, and we're not saying that it's wrong, but sometimes there are, in marketing research, there are questions that kind of may lead people, for example, to respond in a certain way, and that kind of skews the results of the research. And why are people doing marketing research in the first place? They're doing marketing research in the first place in order to give managers information to help them make better decisions. So that if you're kind of muddying the waters with the way that the question is worded, you're not necessarily giving managers unbiased information with which to make decisions. We can cite a lot of other um, um, ethical issues associated with marketing research as well. And it's actually one of the reasons sometimes why experimentation isn't used extensively in marketing research, is because many marketers don't feel that if you're kind of like giving somebody one is getting a treatment and somebody's not getting a treatment, there's some uncomfortability, particularly with the idea that if the treatment is really positive, the people that aren't getting the treatment are kind of at a disadvantage. All right, so we briefly talked about ethics. A second thing we'll talk about with respect to socially responsible marketing involves criticisms of marketing, and there are a lot of criticisms of marketing, and we'll focus on two. The first that we'll talk about is marketing is criticized because it gets people to spend money on stuff that they can't afford, and marketing does this in a number of different ways. And again, this ties in to some extent with the ethical thing that we talked about before, the ethical topic that we just talked about, in the sense that you know promotional activities, promotional materials can really put pressure on people to make them feel inferior, or maybe make them feel like they're social outcasts if they don't use a particular product or buy or use a particular service. Um, I like to talk about credit. And when I was your age, and many of you, and I know a few of you are not what I would do not fall into the traditional undergraduate or traditional age undergraduate classification, which is basically between 18 and 24. Some of you are a few years older. But when I was your age, traditional undergraduate college students very rarely had a revolving credit, such as a MasterCard or a Visa, in part because most companies viewed college students as a risky market, in part because when you're between 18 and 24 and you might be a full-time college student, you don't have a lot of income, which means you don't have a lot of money to spend. But the flip side of that is that if you give people credit cards, it makes it a lot easier to purchase things. And so the trade-off or the dilemma is, do we build consumption by offering people credit? And in today's world, it's really easy to get credit, and you may know of people who have 5, 6, 7, 8 credit cards that have maximum limits of whatever, and they're pretty close to being maxed out on every credit card. They can't afford to pay the debt, right? I mean, they're just in tremendous debt because of the ability to facilitate people buying. And again, the pressure that's put on, if you don't use this particularly fragrance, you're not going to be attractive. If you don't drink this beer, you're going to be a loser, right? The social kinds of pressures that are put on. So one criticism of marketing is that it forces, or it gets people to purchase things that they really can't afford. A second criticism that we'll talk about is that marketers will give customers what they want, whether or not it's good for them. Right, and this is a slippery slope, because definitions of marketing have often focused on satisfying customer needs and wants, and so to not satisfy customer needs and wants is not a good thing, but how much is too much? And so if you look at something like portion sizes, if you've traveled outside the United States, you recognize that portion sizes in many other countries are much smaller than they are in the United States. And one of the problems with portion sizes in the United States is that if you look over the last 30 years, the obesity rate in the United States, the number of people who are overweight or obese is much greater than it was, in part because we've got these supersized meals, and part of the reason is because people weren't satisfied with regular sized meals. So you had to make a larger helping of French fries. You need to have a larger soft drink, right? You need to increase, increase the number of Big Macs, 2 Big Macs for one, right? A buy one get one kind of situation. And while you say, well, people getting fat, what's the big deal? That has marketing implications, actually. I've done, didn't do it this year, but for a number of years I've been engaged with the Catholic Cemeteries Conference. And I do a 2-day seminar for them, basically on principles of marketing. And what happens is, people who are overweight, they die, right? Everybody dies, but overweight people die. And what's happened is there's a huge emerging market for, like oversized caskets and things of that nature. So there, are implications, and these huge food portions aren't really good for you. Okay, so a second criticism of marketing is that it gives customers what they want, regardless of whether it's good or bad for them. And the third thing that we'll look at is associated with socially responsible marketing is a so-called triple bottom line approach, sometimes called 3Ps: people, planet, profit, or also you've suggest that marketers should look at social, environmental, and financial considerations. And so what you have is a situation where instead of just looking at a decision from one perspective, right, the financial or the profit perspective, the triple bottom line approach says you need to look at the people aspect, the planet aspect, as well as the financial aspect. And there's a lot of examples that we could give, associated with the triple bottom line. So you look at, for example, you want to look at something like, why do so many companies produce apparel in the Pacific Rim countries? And largely it's because, right, and I, as a logistics guy, would say, you got to it's a lot, it costs a lot more money to transport something from Shanghai to Los Angeles than it does from San Antonio to Los Angeles. But, right, why are so many things being made in the Pacific Rim? In many cases, because the labor costs, right, people, are much lower. Secondly, in terms of planetary considerations, or environmental considerations, the various regulations are much different and much more lenient in a number of non-Western and in developing countries. So, for example, they're not as concerned about water pollution. They're not as concerned about air pollution, right? They're not as concerned about, cutting down all the trees, because who cares? This is providing jobs. The other side of the coin is that from a people perspective, they're not necessarily paying the people as much money, and the working conditions sometimes are abysmal. Would be an improvement in some cases. I mean, there are situations where these people are working 12-hour shifts, they're working in poor lighting, there's poor ventilation, and the good news is the products that they're producing are relatively inexpensive. So we've talked about socially responsible marketing. The clock on the wall, or the clock on the recorder, tells me I'm about 18 and a half minutes. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll catch you down the road. See ya. Bye.